Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. You're watching Alaska Weather. Thanks for joining us on this 5th of November. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, and in parts of southwestern Alaska, that's very important tonight as freezing rain is moving through your region and is expected to continue as we move through the overnight hours and into early tomorrow morning. We may start to see some improvement from west to east gradually into Wednesday afternoon, and it may not be until Thursday before a lot of that substantial periods of freezing rain is actually over. For the very latest information, call 1-800-472-0391. That is your Alaska Weather information line. It is free. It's an easy way to get to your forecast. If you don't have a landline that you can can always use the website. That works really well on a desktop computer. But if you have low bandwidth or not a great cell signal, you can try mobile.weather.gov and then type in your location, say Newtok or Antioch. And if you have a cell signal, that'll work just fine. It's very low bandwidth and it should load a lot easier than kind of a heavier page like this. If you can't find what you're looking for, let me know. I'm happy to help any way I possibly can. David.Snider@NOAA.gov is how you let me know if things work, if they don't work, or if you've just got a general complaint or comment about the show. I'm always welcome to receive that as well. Here's a look at our hazardous weather tonight. Across the region, we have a lot of yellow and red. Let's start with the red. These are warnings, winter storm warnings for the Yukon Delta, the Kuskokwim Delta, the lower Yukon Valley, the upper parts of the Kuskokwim Valley, all the way up to McGrath. The real big trouble spots, though, for freezing rain tonight are going to be from Sleetmute to Antioch and then out to about Bethel here. In many of these locations already today, we have heard reports of at least about 0.2 of an inch of ice on cold surfaces. When you get up to about a 1/4 inch to about a 1/2 inch, that's when we start to usually hear about trouble with trees and power lines. Now, not a lot of trees, of course, that's not our main concern, but the one that's really going to cause a lot of problems for people would be a power line. And when you start getting about a 1/2 inch of ice on power lines, it's usually too much weight for most power lines to bear. And we start hearing about outages or lines falling and snapping. So the first thing I would say is, as always, if a power line falls in your area, stay away from it. Don't touch it, don't mess with it, don't try and help. Let the power company, let AKwx come out and make sure that that is going to be okay and the power is turned off before anything happens to that. Stay away from a down power line at all costs. It is very, very dangerous stuff. Of course, as you get down to the Yukon Valley there, it looks like gradually as you creep northward, the risk for snow to mix in for that freezing rain is a little bit more likely. But you're going to really have to get north of Galena, north of Kaltag before we start to see any sizable accumulations. And a lot of that will probably be on the 4 to 7 inch range on the top end there. Most of what you'll see out here is going to be a mix of snow and freezing rain, mostly light amounts of freezing rain from Bettles to Fort Yukon to Fairbanks, the Deltana, Tanana Flats region into the Healy area, as well as the Tanana area in the central interior. Most of what you're going to see is light amounts of snow. But as you get up to Ambler and Bettles and the upper Kobuk and Noatak valleys, and the upper Koyukuk Valley for that matter, we're talking about wind. Wind is going to be the primary issue as we head into Wednesday afternoon and Thursday morning. A strong northeasterly wind is going to come off the mountains there anywhere from about 15 to 30 miles per hour and gusting to about 45. So we've got an awful lot going on across the central and the west and the southwestern parts of the state tonight. Again, warm and wet air moving over cold surfaces there, likely leading to continued freezing rain across parts of the lower Yukon and the upper Kuskokwim, especially between Bethel, Antioch, and Sleetmute, and then pushing its way up into Grayling. This region here is going to see the worst amount of freezing rain. And as always, if you have information to share, pass that on through your VPSO, pass that on through local authorities, or just reach out to us on the website, Twitter, or Facebook. Those reports really help us understand how bad the weather is in your community, and we can compare that to the observations that we're seeing from your airports to make sure that we're getting that forecast right and we can help you understand what's coming next. As you look northward again, it's going to be snow and then wind as you get up into the northern tier here, generally from Ambler out toward Bells and just north of Fort Yukon. So hunker down, stay safe, stay off the roadways if you can tonight. Things are going to be extra slippery, especially here in parts of Southwest. And as we go into Wednesday and Thursday, travel conditions around the central and western interior could be a little slippery as well. Here's a look at the satellite picture, and maybe you can see what's going on here. We've got a strong area of low pressure working into the Gulf, but the main feature that's giving us trouble right now is the wave of low pressure working into Southwest. And underneath all of this, if we could just kind of peel back the onion layer a little bit, we'd have cold air underneath this that's made its way all the way down into the Southwest. But over the top of that is all that warm and wet air coming up out of the subtropics. A lot of moisture has been working its way in from the south and west. And while many in south central and southeast are preparing for just plain old rain because of that, in Southwest, where that cold air is in place, we have warm, wet air making raindrops, and then as it gets down to the surface and touches things that are cold, in fact colder than freezing, so maybe a metal rail that's about 28 degrees, that warm and wet water freezes on contact, just as if you poured some ice into the freezer on kind of the rungs or the shelf there. Eventually, it would freeze. And that's what's happening on the surfaces there in parts of southwestern Alaska and into the Kuskokwim Valley and into the lower Yukon Valley. It's not the best situation. It's not unusual. It does happen, but when it happens at a rate that brings ice accumulation up to about a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch, that starts to be a problem for those power lines. So again, report those problems to your power company. Stay away from power lines at all costs and let the professionals manage that. Don't try and be a hero, because power is just nothing to mess with when you're talking about power lines there, of course. Now, as we look into the future there with low pressure working its way northward, eventually this is going to fan out across the interior. A much better chance that a lot more of that moisture in the interior is going to be snow. And then we have another wave back behind that with high pressure trying to hold it off for now. You can see that out of eastern Russia at 1,028 millibars, another high at 1,032 millibars across the north slope, and then our low pressure here just south of the Alaska Peninsula. A lot of wet air is moving northward. This is going to be a very slow mover, in fact, as we go through tonight and the next 24 hours. Periods of freezing rain will be spreading north and west of the Alaska Range. Everything that we see across south central right now generally looks to be wet weather with high elevation snow at best. Colder air moving across the north slope on Wednesday afternoon will produce some areas of light snow there. But again, this pink shaded color with the tilde and the dot, that means freezing rain, and it looks like we'll at least have some mixed precipitation spreading its way into the interior along the Yukon Valley and north. A much better chance of snow to the south of all this, including Bristol Bay, Kodiak Island, and into southeast. It all looks to be plain old rain with low pressure holding just south of the Pribilofs at 989 millibars. Another thing to consider as we go into Thursday and Friday, the wind should improve across the Beaufort Seacoast for tonight and into tomorrow. Heavy freezing spray is expected across the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast, and all that, of course, is due to the open water. Without open water, that wouldn't be a risk, but that's where we are. As we head into the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range for Thursday, you can see the tight packing of the pressure gradient, and to me that says a lot of wind, and wind advisories are posted for the upper Kobuk, Noatak valleys, and the upper Koyukuk valleys as we go into Thursday afternoon. Low pressure doesn't move much by Thursday out in the Bering. We do have a new player in the Gulf by this point, and that will be spreading warm and wet air into southeast, continuing the chance of rain, but you also see the threat for at least some areas of freezing rain continuing in south and west through Thursday afternoon. So again, a messy situation. Here's a quick check of temps to get you through your Wednesday. 20s and 30s for southeast, for south central, Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula included. Temps will hover in the upper 40s to about 50 degrees. Really warm and wet stuff, but that cold air is the problem, and its proximity to that very warm and wet air overhead is the bigger problem. 20s and 30s there underneath all of that where the freezing rain is occurring. In the interior, temps into the lower to mid-teens, -3 for Bettles, -8 for Arctic Village, teens and 20s up north. As we get into the daytime tomorrow, look for lower to mid-20s across the north slope, 29 in Nome, 18 around Galena, 30s and 40s for southwest, lower 50s for the Alaska Peninsula, south central in the 40s, southeast 30s and 40s for you, 25 in Fairbanks.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And on to aviation now. IFR concerns will linger around most of the Gulf Coast, especially south and west of Cordova. Southeast right now, we're looking at mainly marginal conditions and through the inside passage and the outer coast. For south and west, especially through the Yukon Delta, a lot of this will also include some severe icing potential, especially Wednesday morning, and this will gradually improve as we go through the day. For central and southern parts of the Bering Sea, around St. Paul and St. George into the central chain, we expect to see IFR. And across the North Slope communities, just south of Point Barrow and into AKwx, and likely east toward New Ixet and all the way through Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse and east toward Kaktovik, IFR will start your day. As we get into the afternoon, a lot of that IFR will push up, or actually southward, into the north-facing slopes of the Brooks Range and the North Slope communities itself. For most of the coastal villages, we're looking at marginal concerns and probably into New Ixet as well. And then as we get into the Yukon Valley, looking at IFR there, a very slender stripe there of poor visibility, low ceilings, and likely severe icing in some cases as well as a threat for freezing rain continues. And across the Yukon Delta into St. Paul and St. George and into the Pacific coast of the Alaska Peninsula, really most of the Gulf Coast communities. And once again, most of southeast looks to be marginal through most of the afternoon, but you're going to see IFR developing here across our northern bays and passes, Glacier Bay up toward the northern end of the Lynn Canal, and Chilkoot and White Pass likely looking at conditions going down. That'll continue and worsen as we get into Thursday morning. IFR really looks like for most of southeast, most of the Gulf Coast, most of Kodiak Island and the Pacific coast of the Alaska Peninsula. You'll probably see some improvement here across the eastern chain. And the Yukon and Kuskokwim Delta also looking at IFR all the way out toward St. Paul and St. George, through the Alaska Range passes and into the Yukon and Tanana valleys there. And then a lot of improvement as you get north of the Yukon Valley, but then you're back into marginal and IFR concerns through some of your favorite passes. Marginal conditions through most of the North Slope as we get into Thursday afternoon. IFR stretches from St. Lawrence Island into the Yukon Delta and westward St. Matthew. Marginal conditions for most of the chain, the Alaska Peninsula, and then the Gulf back into IFR, including northern parts of southeast, Chilkoot and White Pass, Glacier Bay, all the way to Yakutat and Prince William Sound, Kenai Fjords region, the Cook Inlet region, generally looking at marginal conditions south of the Forelands. North of that, we're looking at least some potential for VFR into Thursday afternoon through some parts of the Susitna Valley and generally from Anchorage and west. Here's a look at your pass conditions in detail then. Right now, it looks like Anaktuvik and Anigan Pass will start out at least with some hints of VFR in the area and then leaning over to worse conditions as we go throughout your day. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass expecting to see IFR most of the day. The same said for Rainy Pass. Windy Pass expecting to be marginal most of your Wednesday, and it looks like Isabel Pass, probably IFR. Mentasta Pass, though, right now, VFR for a good chunk of the day. Marginal conditions not too far off, but right now it looks like we might sneak out with some okay weather there. Tanita Pass looking for marginal conditions for your Wednesday. Portage Pass on the eastern side, it's going to be fairly low. The western side has a chance of being marginal, if not VFR, hit and miss. And Chilkoot and White Pass looking at conditions leaning over toward IFR and getting worse as we get into Thursday. Freezing levels right now show a pretty stout packing of the temperature gradient from 2,000 feet around Chilkoot and White Pass to about 8,000 feet over the Dixon entrance all the way out toward Kodiak Island. All the cold air is sliding to the east and southeast with warmer air lifting northward, but we do have overrunning taking shape. We were talking about this last week, and the concern is that we have warm and wet air sliding up and over a shallow layer of surface cold air over the southwest, and that again is setting up a perfect condition for freezing rain in southwest. That's ongoing today and will continue into early tomorrow morning. So again, we're watching this slender strip of icing that could be fairly severe, especially below 1,000 feet around the Yukon Valley and pushing its way into the interior as we go into Wednesday morning. So be mindful of that and avoid that at all costs. 8,000 to 9,000 feet across the west, above 9,000 feet across the Gulf. Still a lot of warm air here and out across the west. Your jet stream shows a ridge of high pressure west of the Bering Strait, a trough of cold air allowing the deepest cold to slide east and south and away from Alaska with a ridge of high pressure over the central and eastern Gulf. 120 knot winds there. Southerly flow coming in at 9,000 feet across southwestern Alaska, anywhere from 20 to 35 knots. Northwesterlies across the North Slope, generally the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, the only group seeing that at around 20 knots. At 3,000 feet, you can see our brief little ridge here associated with the trough that's sitting across the southern Bering. Southerly winds rule the roost across most of Alaska right now, and turbulence potential generally below 5,000 feet across south and western Alaska as we go into Wednesday. Some chop across the western Brooks Range, St. Lawrence Island, and the western chain. Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Dave Snider, and joining me today is Cindy Preller. She's the Tsunami Program Manager for Alaska Region's National Weather Service. And Cindy, we hear a lot about tsunamis in the news, probably a lot more than we used to, but let's remind everybody, what is a tsunami?
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Sure.
Tsunami is basically, it's really simple. It's just a disturbance in the water column. So the entire water column from the seafloor to the sea surface is disturbed by something major, usually a major earthquake. But it can also be a volcanic eruption, even an asteroid. Landslide is especially dangerous.
Okay, so if I'm sitting in my bathtub and I drop a bath toy, that could be a bathtub tsunami.
It is absolutely a bathtub tsunami.
Okay, very good. So Alaska is one of the states, or maybe the state, with the greatest amount of coastline. So tsunamis are a pretty major risk here in Alaska. Who is most at risk?
Yeah, Alaska is significant. We actually make most of the Pacific's tsunamis on the Aleutian Trench. And it's where the Pacific plate is subducting underneath the American plate. And we produce some very large, great quakes. And of course, the most at risk is the Aleutian Trench.
Okay.
But that extends into south central Alaska as well. They're at huge risk. And then southeast Alaska's risk is really mostly landslide focused.
Okay. Are there any places along the Alaskan coastline that don't have a tsunami risk, or at least a very, very low risk?
Absolutely. The Bering Sea's risk is very low, and the Arctic's risk is very low as well.
Okay, so when we're talking about tsunami dangers, those are places that need to be monitored, but probably not really.
No, I mean, I won't say never.
Yeah, sure.
Because I know better.
Science knows better.
Right. So,
very good.
Near to never.
Okay. Well, let's just say you're on the coast, anywhere in Alaska. What are warning signs that tsunami dangers are threatening you right now?
This is super important because Alaska's greatest risk, especially out on the Aleutians and South Central, is a near-field tsunami, and then of course the landslides in southeast. It's even more intense because we can't.
Shorter warning time.
No warning time.
Okay.
The earthquake is the warning.
Okay.
And that is the most important thing for anybody to remember. The water can arrive in less than 2 minutes.
2 minutes. Wow.
Yeah, at the National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, we need to get the warning out in 5 minutes. So for those near-field tsunamis, it's the earthquake is the warning. So if you feel shaking, and of course the first thing you do is drop, cover, and hold, and you need to start counting slowly to 20.
The right way. How do you do that?
Oh, I teach kids to do it with their favorite things. So 1 chocolate, 2 chocolate, 3 chocolate, but you can count anything you like. And if you're thinking of something happy, that helps. Especially helps kids, but it'll help your psyche.
So you don't speed up because you're getting stressed out.
Right. It actually lowers your heart rate.
Interesting.
You know, so if you think of something you love and practice that. So you're in an earthquake, you're under the table, you're next to the ocean. Right. This is important if you're next to the ocean. If you're not next to the ocean, don't worry about it. Just stay in place under cover.
And you're talking about a mile, a quarter mile? What's close?
A mile, even a couple miles. You know, our rule of thumb used to be a mile inland was safe, but the last few tsunamis have taught us otherwise. So, yeah, you know, in Japan we had inundation up to 10 miles. So.
And that was a big quake.
That was a big quake.
So you have a quake, you're counting slowly to 20.
To 20.
What's next?
And if you get to 20 and it's still shaking, you need to evacuate. And that is, that's scary.
Yeah.
Because you're evacuating in a live event that's still shaking. You know, 1964 shook for 4.5 minutes. Indonesia shook for 12 minutes.
Wow.
Japan, I think, shook for 6. I'm not sure of that, but it was long. Anyway, more than 20 seconds.
And that's a sign of a very major earthquake, the worst.
Well, 20 seconds is a magnitude 7, so that's not the worst. But what a magnitude 7 can do is trigger a landslide. And those landslides might be a submarine landslide, so you won't see it, you won't hear it, you won't know it, and then the water's moving. So that's really, really, really dangerous. That's what happened in '64 first. Seward, Valdez, Whittier all had landslides first.
And when you're talking about the water is a warning sign too. What happens with the water that gives you a very easy visual sign that something's changing?
Not guaranteed. It might go out, it might go way out really fast enough to leave the fish behind, but that's not guaranteed. It might just be a fast flood instead. So either way, if it's acting like a super fast rising tide, faster than a tide should rise, get out of there. And if it goes out really fast, get out of there. You know, we lost a lot of lives because people will go check out the new tide pools or pick up fish or shells or, you know, so, and it should feel weird. You know, it should be weird.
So pay attention to those natural warning signs and how you feel, because those are maybe the only clues you have.
Right, and you know, sound also. You can hear a tsunami. It'll sound like a roaring train, maybe. Or it might sound silent because the water's been pulled out. Right. And that's pretty weird. Imagine camping at night near the beach, and all of a sudden you don't hear the ocean anymore. That would be different. That would be weird. Yeah. Okay. And then you also might hear blowing bubbles, and that's actually from the pressure that's blowing the air out from the sand grains, rock grains. So if you hear blowing bubbles, that's a little weird. Okay. Or clinking rocks, you know, like a rain stick. So those are the sound signs. So the visual is rushing in or rushing out, and roaring especially. Okay. Yeah. So it takes a lot of work to get people and keep people aware of what the tsunami warning signs are and what their risks are around Alaska. And there's a website that can help them do that. Where can they go online to get more information for their school, their home, their church, their business? Oh, there's several. The National Tsunami Warning Center has a website as well, and the easiest way to look that up is just NTWC. NTWC. The URL is not intuitive at all. Okay. There's also ready.alaska.gov. The state of Alaska has a lot of helpful stuff. Preparedness kits. They have everything you need to get ready. Okay. And then for teachers and others, there's a wonderful curriculum called Alaska Tsunami Education Program. Alaska Tsunami Education Program. Okay. And that's AKwx. AKwx. Okay, very good. Those are really good tips to get more information and search that out and help your own community stay safe with the threat of tsunamis around Alaska. Next time we come back and talk to you some more about the Tsunami Ready program and get more in depth on how people can learn more about the risks and what to do here in Alaska. So thank you for joining us today, Cindy. And next time on Alaska Weather Facts, more on tsunamis around Alaska. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
And back with a look at your sea ice edge. The first thing to tell you about is that a heavy freezing spray warning is in effect for the central and eastern Beaufort seacoasts here, and that is simply due to the amount of open water off the north slope. A lot of wind moving through, and that combined with cold sea surface temperatures as well as open water is creating that threat. That'll continue tonight and into tomorrow. Not a whole lot of new ice down the Chukchi Coast, but you can see some marginal ice growing up into Kotzebue Sound and across Norton Sound as well, and some marginal ice down here across the Yukon and the Kuskokwim coastlines. This goes a little bit further than our map allows today, but really not a whole lot of change. We are seeing a little more growth there across the Beaufort Seacoast, but not enough to keep that heavy freezing spray out of the region just yet, so do be careful if you're in the water. Out across southeast, 10 to 15 knots across the inside as we go into Wednesday. North and easterly flows will be the predominant direction there, save for Clarence Strait. Light out of the south and east and 3-foot seas there. A stronger south and easterly flow coming up the outer coast, 25 to 30 knots sustained, and 9 to 11-foot seas are expected on Wednesday. That diminishes on Thursday with seas coming down to about 8 to 9 feet. A 15 to 20 knot flow still coming up from the south and east along the outer coast, and still looking at north and northeasterly winds for the Stevens Passage and Lynn Canal regions, 15 to 20 there, and about 3 to 4-foot seas. As you look at south central, winds will be a little stronger inside of Prince William Sound, 20 knots and 4-foot seas there. Easterlies coming across the northern Gulf, 30 to 40 knots, looking for 16-foot seas on the western Barrens, and stronger northerly winds coming down through Cook Inlet, 25 to 35 knots sustained, and 8 to 12-foot seas expected on Wednesday. That should improve on Thursday, 20 to 30 knots there from the north and the east, looking at 8 to 10-foot seas with an easterly flow coming across the Gulf, generally at 20 knots with 8-foot seas included, and we'll hold on to that northeasterly flow inside of Prince William Sound, 20 knots and 3-foot seas for your Thursday. In Bristol Bay, easterlies coming off the Alaska Peninsula all the way down the Bering Sea coast, 30 knots and 6-foot seas there. South and easterly winds coming across Kodiak Island, 20 to 30 knots, expecting 9 to 11-foot seas for the most part across the north and western Gulf for your Wednesday, maybe as much as 12 as you move south and west of AKwx. As you get into Thursday, winds diminish just a little bit, 15 to 25 across the Bering Sea coast, 5-foot seas there, anywhere from 6 to 7-foot seas down the Alaska Peninsula coastline for the Pacific, and maybe as much as 8-foot seas south of AKwx and east all the way to Kodiak there on Thursday. For the Aleutians, a north and westerly flow is expected across the central and eastern chain, as little as 10 knots across the east to as much as 25 to 30 as you move across Adak and Atka and out toward Kiska. Anywhere from 8 to 11-foot seas, there westerlies building in from Kiska to Shemya, 12-foot seas and a 25-knot wind from the west. As you move into Thursday, a west to southerly flow develops across the central and eastern chain. 15 to 30 in most areas should do the trick. You're looking at about 25 to 30 out across the west, and maybe about 8 to 12-foot seas there across the western chain on a 20-knot wind from the west and northwest for your Thursday afternoon. For Wednesday, across the west coast, a northeasterly offshore wind will continue 25 to 30 there. Easterlies around the Kuskokwim Delta, still choppy with 9-foot seas. St. Paul and St. George looking at 11-foot seas on a 25-knot wind, 30 knots out towards St. Matthew on the 13-foot seas, and 5-foot seas around Norton Sound. Again, 25 knots moving over the sound waters there. For Thursday, the winds come up a little bit more. Again, stronger winds out across the northern interior will be working their way out to the west as you go through your Thursday, so it should get a little choppier. 25 to 30 in most areas, 8 to 12-foot seas, as much as 14 around St. Matthew, 7-foot seas, and diminishing around St. Paul and St. George with an easterly wind at 15. And for the North Slope, again, heavy freezing spray warnings for the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast, 15 to 20 knot winds. Northeasterlies coming down the Chukchi coast at 25 to 30, 10-foot seas off of Point Hope. As you get into Thursday, still looking at 15 to 20 knot winds across the Beaufort Seacoast, 4-foot seas there, and 8 to 12-foot seas off of Point Lay all the way down toward Point Hope. So pretty blustery conditions as we go. Here's a recap of tonight's weather. A lot going on again from southwest all the way to the interior. Winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories. For southwest, the worst of it will be where we have the tilde and the little dot there. It simply means freezing rain is likely. Many areas in southwest have seen about 2 to 3/10 of an inch of freezing rain on cold surfaces already. That's expected to continue overnight. In places from Bethel up to Antioch to Sleep Butte and north to Grayling. North of Grayling, we expect that along the Yukon Valley and northward to be a lot better chance of mixing in with snow. And the further north you go, the more snow there will be. So north of Caltag, for example, about 4 to 7 inches is possible there. As we get into Wednesday and Thursday, winds are going to come up across the Brooks Range. Watch for wind advisories to be included in your weather as we go through your Thursday. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.